In this episode of Middle East Files, a deeper look at Russia's influence in the region, the factors that shape the historical relations with the Middle East countries. How has the Syrian crisis forced Russia to flex its military and diplomatic muscles? Can Russia find its foothold in the Middle East? The rise of the Russian influence in the Middle East region. In this episode of Middle East Files.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Middle East Files. Today's episode, Russian influence over the Middle East. Russia has played a significant role as a top player in the Middle East, but its emergence in the region started centuries ago. From the Ottoman Empire to World War I, Russia's historical influence in the Levant was seen as a key element in modeling the Middle East map. Our first file has all the details. Russia's historical relationship with the Middle East countries can be traced back to the 15th century and the rule of Ivan III. It was then that Russia started its geographic expansion to the south and the east. It laid the foundation for a nation that bordered and traded with the largely Muslim world to its south. While economic ties were strong, Russia also had strong interest in maintaining good ties with the Orthodox churches in the Ottoman Empire. During the 18th century, Russia's influence had grown to become a threat to the influence of the Ottoman Empire. Many military confrontations took place between the two powers, particularly over the strategic Black Sea. The tug-of-war continued over the 19th century until the Crimean War, in which France and Britain supported the Ottomans in their victory over Russia. Decades later, the Russo-Turkish War ended with the Ottoman Empire losing Eastern Europe. In World War I, Russians allied themselves with the British and the French in the war that redrew the Middle East map. Russian relations with the Middle East countries have not been much defined by economic interests compared with other European powers during the 19th and 20th centuries. The Middle East, now mostly dominated by the United States of America, had played a major role during the Cold War against the West, as well as after the Russian Revolution and the rise of the Soviet Union. The Soviet stance against Zionism was clear, and the USSR alliances in the Middle East since the formation of Israel reflect that position. The collapse of the Soviet Union dealt a temporary blow to the anti-Zionist resistance camp in the Middle East. But over a decade earlier, the emergence of the Iranian Islamic Revolution filled in the gap left by the Soviets. In 2000, the then Prime Minister Vladimir Putin won the presidential elections in Russia, ushering in a new era and return to prominence for Moscow to once again play a role in the Middle East. Joining me to discuss Russia's historical influence in the Middle East is Dr. Talal Nizamuddin, and he is the Dean of Student Affairs at the American University of Beirut. Hello, Dr. Talal, and welcome to Middle East Files.
Hello.
Dr. Talal, I want to begin actually with why has Russia been interested within the Middle East?
Obviously, the history of Russia is one of expansion and growth, and it's geographically located in a very strategic point. It actually spans two continents. It's a great Eurasian power, and to a large extent, its geostrategic positioning on its southwestern border encompasses the Middle East from Persia right round to Turkey.
What did the Middle East mean to Russia, maybe in terms of economical terms or political terms, social terms? What do you have to tell us here?
Well, Russia has always sought to expand its trade. When you look at Kievan Rus, the founding of the first empire of Russia, if you like, it was founded on the basis of the trade routes between Scandinavia and Constantinople. The Black Sea offers access out of Russia to the Mediterranean. And until now, historians still debate Russia's behavior in the Middle East. Is it defensive because it fears that its enemies may gain a foothold to surround Russia? Or is it expansionist and it seeks to break out and increase its power and what some people call its desire to reach the warm waters of the Persian Gulf, for example, and as well as the Mediterranean.
Mm-hmm. Can you know a little bit more maybe then about these warm waters that Russia has been eager about over the past?
Sure. As you know, since Peter the Great, Imperial Russia has sought to impose itself as a major naval power in the world, because Peter the Great recognized Russian access by propping up the Ottoman Empire and making sure that Russia does not have special influence over the Bosphorus Straits, which allows shipping to go through from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean.
The evolution of Russian President Vladimir Putin is one that has made him a strategic player. Putin has recently been able to raise Russia's profile in the global arena. Let's take a look at the rise of Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin came into power at the time where the United States was perceived to be the sole superpower in the world. At the same time, the United States was carrying out invasions in Afghanistan and Iraq. They were also supporting anti-Moscow forces in former Soviet republics, most notably in Ukraine and Georgia. US plans for the Middle East started to crumble, and Putin's Russia was ready to reassume its historical role of power in the region.
The rest of our troops in Iraq will come home by the end of the year.
In 2000, Putin made a historic visit to Tehran, the first such visit by a Russian or Soviet head of state since Stalin in 1943. There, and in bold defiance of the US stance, he stated that all Caspian states have the right to develop their peaceful nuclear programs without any restrictions. In 2008, Putin became the first Russian president to visit Libya, sending a message to Washington that Russia is back in the Middle East. However, the real Russian diplomatic muscle began to show as crisis hit many Middle Eastern countries in 2011, most notably in the case of Syria, where Russia vetoed any UN Security Council actions against the Syrian government and stood firmly behind its president Bashar al-Assad. Moscow continued to supply weapons and training to government forces battling extremist elements, backed by the West and some regional countries like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey. US President Barack Obama threatened to carry out military strikes on Damascus in the aftermath of the alleged chemical attack in Ghouta back in September 2013. The Russian diplomacy, based on the Islamic Republic of Iran's initiative, provided a solution that called off the US military action. Russia, at the same time, has played a major role in the deal over Iran's peaceful nuclear energy program. Russia brought together Iran and the Western countries in a historic agreement that allows Tehran to continue pursuing its peaceful nuclear program. In October 2013, Russia started delivering weapons to Iraq as part of a historic $4.3 billion deal. 2013 was an eventful year for Russian foreign policy in the Middle East. It ended with a $2 billion arms deal with Egypt and Russian companies, starting the exploration of gas fields off the coast of Syria. An exclamation point on a phrase that said, "Russia is back."